Hi and welcome to another HM Get Comfortable With Sofa Sessions. Today I'm joined by Rachel Rigg and we're going to talk about the new right to complain under data protection legislation. So Rachel, what's actually changing in terms of the new right to complain?
I mean, it's one of those. You might have heard that the Employment Rights Act came through last year. So people have kind of not really realised there's been other things that have snuck in. So the Data Use and Access Act 2025 came in at the sort of midpoint last year, which has introduced a number of data protection legislation changes. And the one that's most relevant for HR people to be thinking about is the right to complain that has come in.
Yeah, and what type of complaints are we likely to see under those kind of changes?
Yeah, so what we're really expecting to see is any complaint about how data is being processed or how someone has accessed their rights or exercised any of their data rights. So, for example, if someone feels like a subject access request hasn't been dealt with properly, that would be something that they can now complain to the data controller, the employer, about, rather than having to go straight to the ICO and say, regulator, I'm unhappy with how this has been dealt with. So it's cutting a corner really before the regulator has to get involved.
And are there any timeframes or anything like that that employers need to be aware of?
Definitely. So the main thing you need to look out for is the fact that employers now have an obligation, or data controllers now have an obligation, to respond within 30 days to acknowledge a complaint. They don't have to have an outcome to that complaint at that stage, but they do then have to provide an outcome without undue delay, which is a nice, vague time reference to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with that, what are the kind of risks that we need to be aware of as well? Because I presume there'll be some overlap with whistleblowing and grievances and things
Yes,
like that.
absolutely right. So this is where we've got some difficulty. Anyone who is complaining about their data rights being infringed is probably making a protected disclosure as a breach of the law under whistleblowing legislation. So effectively, you need to think about the person who's going to be dealing with these complaints, and are they going to be able to understand what whistleblowing is and what needs to happen under the right whistleblowing procedures? Or if something's more of a grievance, do they know how to signpost it into the correct procedures rather than a data complaint?
And on that sort of topic of signposting, I mean, are there things that employers need to be changing or updating in light of this new right?
Definitely. So your general policies and procedures, making sure that your privacy notices note that there is this right to complain. It's really helpful to bring in an actual process that you want to manage as an employer so you can direct people to it and say, this is where our right to complain work sits, and this is how you can make that complaint. Having someone for that to go to tends to help as well. But then also making sure your grievance and your whistleblowing policies and procedures relate to pointing people to this direction where it relates to data protection complaints will be really helpful.
And obviously, we're talking about this in the context of employers. I mean, are there any practical tips that you would give for employers watching this to get sorted?
Definitely have that process, know who's going to own it and where it sits in the business. The last thing you want is these things coming in and no one knowing who's supposed to pick it up. Understand what your investigation needs to look like and what your outcome, how much information you should be providing as part of that. So you've got uniformity, consistency, and you basically don't let something fall between the gaps by accident.
Thanks for joining us for this HM Sofa Sessions. More details about the things we've talked about today can be found both on our Bite Size podcast, which is found on our YouTube channel, or in our HM Masters newsletter.